Thank you, Deb. Oh, that was so beautiful. Good morning, Center for Spiritual Living, Delaware, beloved community and friends of and as the light that you all are, and welcome any visitors today or in the future listening to this message. The theme for December is celebrating divine truth, and the topic for today is cultivating light. According to Ernest Holmes in the 1938 edition of The Science of Mind, page 430.2, "Ye are the light of the world. Man is the candle of the Lord." How important is that this light be kept trimmed and burning with the oil of pure spirit through the wick of peace and joy. In this way do we glorify that indwelling presence. In the words of Eckhart Tolle, there is only one perpetrator of evil on the planet: human unconsciousness. With this realization, your victim identity dissolves and your true power emerges. Instead of blaming the darkness, you bring in the light. And according to the Dalai Lama, inner darkness, which we call ignorance, is the root of suffering. The more inner light that comes, the more darkness will diminish. This is the only way to achieve salvation or nirvana. Please say with me with joy, "I joyously walk in the light. My consciousness is illumined. I let my light shine." And now, speaking of shining and illumination, I now welcome Dr.
This thing called the light is something that is celebrated this time of year. And think about it, tomorrow night, winter solstice, is the darkest, you could say the darkest time of the year. The shortest daylight and the darkest and the longest night. And since ancient times, the people of the planet, the ancient peoples, gathered around bonfires, and they drummed and they danced and they sang through the night, celebrating this thing called the winter solstice, bringing the light to the darkness, bringing the light to the darkness. And then when the day came, the next day came, they give thanks and celebrated the sunshine, the sunlight, which of course was important to their livelihood and still to this day is extremely important to life on this planet. Over time, humanity began to see a symbolic nature to this thing called dark and light, darkness being equated with ignorance and light with enlightenment. And as it turns out, the mystics knew this. I know, and I want to take a moment actually and honor all of the mystics across the planet and all the mystics that came before us, the great spiritual masters, the great enlightened ones who uplift us and who on whose shoulders we stand as we explore this thing called light, because they knew what scientists are now discovering, that everything is made out of light. Everything in the physical world is made out of light. These body temples that we live in, all that surrounds us is our light waves that are collapsed into particles, right? But it's still light. It's just a form of light. So with that idea in mind, think of all of the symbols of light that we have this time of year. Candles, strings of light decorating our homes and our businesses, bonfires, gathering around bonfires like the ancient people did, right? All of these things remind us and take us back to the awareness of our source and of our very being, which is light. So light, while darkness stands for illumination in the mystical sense, light represents illumination, our alignment with the light and the truth that we are. So Christmas, Hanukkah, Diwali, Kwanzaa, Bodhi Day, Yalda, winter solstice, all of these celebrations use these light representations, candles, strings of light, bonfires, as reminders of who we are in truth, of what God or life is in truth. And it's a reminder for us then to wake up to that and to radiate what that represents: love, peace, joy, beauty, prosperity, all of the things that we just sang about in the radiant light of God. I shine the light. It's a reminder for us to shine the light of who we are in truth and be a beneficial presence on the planet. So today is dedicated to cultivating that light, because we are full participants in creation. We can but consciously cultivate the light that we are. And of course, as we cultivate our own light, we then extend that light automatically because of our interconnection with all life to the rest of the planet. And let us also remember that high levels of consciousness, which are represented by light, are greatly counterbalance, exponentially counterbalance the rest of the consciousness on the planet, those who live in what we would call a state of darkness in their consciousness, an ignorance of their truth, an ignorance of what it means to be the light and to be the presence of the divine on the planet. And our dedication to this path of light, this path of enlightenment, is what our teaching is all about. And it is a reminder that as we walk this path, our lives eventually, if not immediately, become more full of peace, more full of joy, more full of love, a greater perspective on the things that are going on in the world. And even as we grow in enlightenment, all of those things that are unhealed will come forth into our experience so that we can heal them and up-level ourselves as the presence of light. The Dalai Lama, I love that quote by the Dalai Lama, because his reminder is that inner darkness or ignorance of the truth is the root of all suffering. And therefore, what we do is we bring the light to the darkness. We don't fight the darkness. We bring the light to it, and the light diminishes, and the darkness diminishes, the light takes over. He said, this is the only way to achieve salvation or nirvana. So I'd like to begin with a story. It's the story of a father who wanted to decide which of his 3 children would receive his inheritance. So he gave them a challenge. He said, whoever fills a warehouse, he gave them 3 different warehouses, whoever fills your warehouse in the most inexpensive manner will get the inheritance. So the eldest filled his with bags of sand, which were, fairly inexpensive. But then the second son came along, and he decided to fill it with those styrofoam peanuts. And so, that was a little less expensive. And then came along the third son. And this particular son took a candle, placed it in the center of the warehouse, and lit the candle, which of course filled up the entire warehouse. So of course he got the inheritance. But what a beautiful reminder of what it means to fill up a room with light. And you know who they are, the people who fill up the room with light when they enter the room, yes? And even when there are challenges in their lives, they respond with grace and perspective that comes from this place of love and compassion and a willingness to see things from a different perspective, a willingness to return to that present moment awareness as that presence of love. So we have people in our community like that. And I also think of the great masters, spiritual masters like Gandhi and Maya Angelou and Mother Teresa and Jesus and all the many saints and sages and wise men and women in all of the various spiritual traditions, the exalted ones, who respond to hate and fear with love and forgiveness. They are true beacons of light that inspire the world. So cultivating the light. We have great role models for the light. Cultivating the light, it begins with that beautiful quote from the Bible, ye are the light of the world, meaning you are the light of the world. You are the light of the world. You and I are the light of the world. We are light beings, as I had mentioned before. We know that science has demonstrated that. We know that we actually emit photons. That's been measured by scientists. So we can either be a flickering flame or we can be a bonfire. We have a choice. And so that light, though, is already there, ready for us to cultivate and nourish into a brighter, stronger, more brilliant flame. So those of us who seem to be lighter and happier and to have reached higher, more exalted levels of consciousness, understand this idea of oneness, connection to the universal field, and understanding that we are connected, interconnected, the entire world is interconnected, and to see that from a very thoughtful and loving perspective. Just recently, Dan and I were watching something on PBS, I believe, or Nova, maybe it was Nova, about the all of the theories of quantum physics and this idea of quantum entanglement, which beautifully describes our interconnection with all life, and the idea of non-locality, the idea that the universe is present in its fullness in every spot, which is what the great mystics have taught, and that's what we teach in our teachings. The divine is present in its fullness right here where I am, right where each of us is. Its center is everywhere, its circumference is nowhere. So contrast this idea of awareness of interconnection being the presence of love and light with knee-jerk reactions of anger, fearfulness, and defensiveness that is the pattern of so many who operate from the conditioned mind, from inner darkness, in other words. We call that inner darkness. It's the conditioned mind. Eckhart Tolle said, instead of blaming the darkness, bring the light. Instead of blaming the darkness, bring the light. And so it reminds me of the Course in Miracles, that everything that's before us, every interaction is love or a call for love. So the call for love that knee-jerk reaction of others is a call for us to bring love and forgiveness. So made in the likeness and image of the one creator, we're all co-creators. We know that. We practice that in a beautiful form of prayer that we call spiritual mind treatment. Because we have this amazing inner capacity. We have the whole entire field of all possibility and all potentiality. And yet it is this inner capacity to speak the truth, use the power of our word and our thought, and to know the truth that erases the darkness of negative thought, the conditioned mind. That's the beauty of our form of prayer, is that's what it does. It actually erases, over practice and over time, erases the negative thinking that's wired into our neurobiology, erasing it, eliminating it. And again, it's a reminder that we don't fight the darkness. We know the truth. We know the truth. And the darkness disappears. St. John wrote, "The light shines in darkness, and darkness does not overcome it." It's a good thing to remember. So we need not fear the darkness when we remember that we just simply bring the light. As our inner light builds and strengthens with our spiritual practice, we become that light that is a rippling effect that goes across the planet. And in our own worlds, we can actually experience that. So I'd like to illustrate with this story. It's a story of a young girl who was on a city bus crowded with Christmas shoppers. And because everyone was in an exhausted daze, no one noticed that there was a seat or two available on the bus. No one except for that small 5 or 6-year-old girl who tugged at a woman's sleeve and asked, "Would you like a seat?" And then she quietly guided the woman to the empty seat, giving her a chance to get off of her feet and put her bags down and rest. And as each seat became available after each stop when people got off, she would quickly move through the crowd again and search for some burdened person and guide them again to a seat that was available. This little emissary of love, whose eyes sparkled and whose smile shined, immediately turned to the next person and the next person and the next person, helping them find a seat on the bus. And something really interesting began to happen. The people on the bus who previously had been avoiding each other's eyes, avoiding eye contact, were now beginning to smile as they noticed what was going on. A businessman handed part of his paper to someone else to read. People began to have exchanges of conversation with each other. And that little girl then had tangibly changed the entire environment of the bus. Everyone fell into this beautiful, relaxed state. We call it the relaxation response, right? Feeling warm and full of love in this holiday season. And everyone began to actually enjoy the rest of their bus trip. The passengers practically, if you can imagine, floated off the bus, wishing the driver happy holiday and waving to each other as they departed. And also noticing the beauty of the Christmas lights, something that they had not really done since they were 5 or 6 years old. So they began to take on that wonder and that awe of the child's mind, what's called the beginner's mind in Buddhist tradition. And it is written that a little child shall lead them. I'm going to take a moment and honor the birth of a great spiritual master, probably the greatest of all time, Jesus the Christ, that comes at this time of year when we celebrate his birth, knowing that the example of this great one has led us on this path of enlightenment that we follow by changing our thinking, changing our beliefs, and aligning ourselves with truth. So it's important then to find ways to be of service, to be a tangible spreader of the light. We can look to this child who can light up a room with acts of kindness. And the thing about kindness is it's been proven, I love these scientific things, that just not only the giver of kindness and the receiver of kindness benefit and their vibration goes up. In other words, their light is brighter. But those who observe also are lifted in frequency and in light. So everybody benefits. That's that interconnectedness. It's called the mirror effect, but we know it's the interconnectedness of all light. Joy and laughter also cultivates the light. Joy to me is the most important cultivator of my personal inner light. You know how I love to laugh. I think it really turns me and turns all of us into inner bonfires, right? When we are laughing with abandon, we just fill up the room with our laughter and our joy. You know, in our culture, there's a tendency to rush around, get caught up in our daily activities, and forget to give ourselves time for enjoyment, time to laugh, time to do something that we love. So I'm going to invite everybody to consciously, this week, find more time for yourself, to laugh, and to do what you love and enjoy. I was looking, I know the Dalai Lama is known for his laughter, and I found a really beautiful quote by him. It says, "I laugh often. My laughter is contagious." He knows it. He says, "I am a professional laugher." Well, that's what I'm claiming for myself. I am a professional laugher. So this reminds me of a beautiful story. I'd like to end with this lovely, lovely story. It's a story about a little boy who was given the part of the innkeeper in a Christmas pageant. Standing in front of the mirror, he practiced his line. "There is no room at the inn." He did it over and over and over. "There is no room at the inn. There is no room at the inn. There's no room at the inn." So that night at the pageant, he was finally backstage, ready to come on. He got behind the cardboard that had the little door in it that represented the inn, ready to do his one-liner. And the children who were dressed as Mary and Joseph came up and knocked on the cardboard door. He flung the door open, and Joseph, of course, said, "Is there any room in your inn?" To which he said, "Sure, come on in." You know, when we are so full of light, we cannot help ourselves but want to help another person, like this little boy who was the innkeeper. And it feels so good to laugh, doesn't it? I mean, I feel myself filled with God bumps, and I know joy is true. So the next time you see a light of any kind, whether it's the sunlight, the light from your lamp, the Christmas lights, the Hanukkah lights, you know, the Diwali lights, whatever lights there are, I know all of these different spiritual traditions use them. I'm going to invite you to remember what they represent, the light that is within us, and then do all that is in your power to spread the light. Namaste, my friends, and so it is. Amen.